Some stories don't fade with the wind. They settle in the soil, stubborn as cactus roots. And this one, well, it begins in Dry Hollow, where the sun don't set quiet and love ain't always kind. That's how old Amos Redding starts it, rocking on a crooked porch, his voice like boots on gravel. And every time he tells it, folks lean in a little closer. It was the spring of 1879 when Eli Mercer rode into town, dust trailing behind like smoke from old sins. He was lean, quiet, with eyes the color of burnt rope, and a past no one dared ask about. His saddle was patched, his boots worn thin, and his hat brim was pulled low, not from sun, but shame. Eli had no family. His ma died birthing him. His pa was killed in the war between the states. Since he was 15, Eli drifted from ranch to ranch, never staying long enough to leave a shadow. Dry Hollow didn't look like much, just a saloon with broken shutters, a mercantile that doubled as a post office, and a church whose bell hadn't rung since the preacher ran off with someone's wife. Folks there kept to themselves, wary of newcomers. But when Eli passed the Whitlock Ranch, he saw smoke, thick, black, frantic. Without hesitation, he kicked his horse into a dead sprint. The barn was ablaze, flames licking the wooden beams like a hungry beast. Horses screamed from inside, panicked and trapped. A woman, soot-covered and stumbling, clutched a small girl in her arms as she stumbled from the house. She tripped, fell, shielding the child with her body. Eli was off his horse before it stopped moving. "Get back!" she cried, but he ignored her. He darted into the inferno. Inside, the horses bucked in terror, eyes wide with smoke. Eli cut the ropes with a broken pitchfork and slapped their haunches. They bolted out, trailing fire and panic. By the time he staggered out, coughing and blistered, the barn roof collapsed behind him. Flames roared like thunder, but the worst had passed. The woman knelt in the date, her dress scorched and her eyes glassy with shock. "You all right?" Eli asked, voice raspy. She nodded, pulling her daughter close. "Thanks to you." That was how Eli met Clara Whitlock, widow of the late James Whitlock, a once-respected rancher whose sudden death the year prior still stirred whispers. Some said he fell from a horse. Others said he fell into bad company. Clara was in her early 30s, with a face that had known beauty and grief in equal measure. Her hands were strong, calloused. Her daughter, Lila, was no older than 6, with tangled blonde hair and silent eyes. Eli meant to leave after the fire, but Clara insisted he stay for supper. Then another day. Then a week. Days turned to weeks. Eli fixed fence posts and corral gates. He never asked for payment, just a place to sleep and enough food to work on. Clara offered both. Every morning, she brought him coffee in a tin cup. Every evening, they sat on the porch, listening to coyotes in the distance. One evening, after hammering a new crossbeam into the chicken coop, Eli caught Clara watching him. "You've got the hands of a rancher," she said. "I've got the hands of a man who's run out of places to go." She smiled faintly. Maybe that's the same thing. It wasn't long before Lila took to him. She'd bring him nails when he worked, and once, he caught her mimicking how he walked, boots too big for her tiny feet. She never spoke much, but she clung to him in quiet ways, a tug on the shirt, a nod when she brought him his hat. The town took notice. At the saloon, the sheriff, Walter Granger, raised an eyebrow. "That fella staying with Clara. You know him." "No one does," the bartender muttered. "But he don't cause trouble." "Trouble don't always knock loud," the sheriff said, sipping his rye. Granger had been close to Clara's husband. Too close, some said, and he didn't like someone else stepping into his shadow. One dusty afternoon, while Eli was mending the gate, the sheriff rode up. "You Mercer?" Eli looked up, sweat glistening off his neck. "Depends who's asking." "I'm the law here. Walter Granger. Just checking on things. Folks get nervous when strangers play house." "I ain't playing nothing," Eli said, turning back to his work. The sheriff didn't smile. "Just remember, this town's seen its fair share of fire." He tipped his hat and rode off. Eli didn't mention it to Clara. But that night, he cleaned his revolver for the first time in weeks. A few nights later, while walking back from the well, Eli heard a horse in the distance, hooves too slow to be casual, too soft to be welcome. He stood still. A rider paused on the ridge, silhouetted against the moon. A tall man, wearing a duster and a wide-brimmed hat. He didn't speak. He just watched, then turned, and rode off into the night. Eli said nothing to Clara, but his gut twisted. Shadows from the past never wandered far. Still, for a moment in time, peace settled over the Whitlock ranch like dust after a storm. Lila laughed. Clara sang old lullabies on the porch. And Eli, for the first time in years, let his guard slip. But even the desert knows, the stillest winds often come before the worst storms. Eli stayed. Not because he asked to, because Clara never told him to leave. The rhythm of the ranch filled the silence between them. Mornings began with the scrape of metal against wood, the rattle of feed buckets, and Clara's quiet footsteps across the porch. Evenings closed with lantern glow, fiddle music drifting from the saloon in town, and Lila's soft breathing by the window. For a while, it felt like the world had slowed to their pace. One warm dusk, Clara leaned against the fence as Eli shoveled hay. "You don't talk much," she said. "I say what needs saying to." She smirked. "That's so." He shrugged. "Talking too much got men killed in the war." Her smile faded. "You were in it." Eli nodded. "Scout for the Union. Then I wasn't. Things got gray." Clara didn't press. She simply said, "I lost a brother in Shiloh. I get it." It was the first crack in her wall. From then on, more followed. They rode into Dry Hollow together the following Sunday. Clara in a navy riding dress, Eli in his patched coat and dust-worn boots. Whispers chased them through the churchyard like dry leaves. Some folks nodded politely. Others didn't bother. Inside the church, Sheriff Granger stood near the back pew, arms crossed. After the sermon, he tipped his hat to Clara. "Didn't think you'd bring him." "I don't need your permission, Walter." "No, but you might need protection." His eyes flicked toward Eli. "Sometimes the past ain't done just 'cause you are." Eli stepped forward. "You got something to say, say it." Granger didn't flinch. "I say it when it counts." The tension rippled like a sudden gust through still air. Clara placed her hand on Eli's arm. "Let's go." Back at the ranch, Clara set a small cake on the table. Lila's birthday. 7 years old. "I didn't know," Eli said quietly. "She doesn't like a fuss. Never has." As Lila blew out the single candle, she looked to Eli. "Can I call you Pa?" The air went still. Eli froze, something behind his eyes darkening. Then, slowly, he knelt beside her. "Only if you want to." She nodded. That night, as Lila slept, Clara sat beside Eli on the porch. She hasn't called anyone that since James. Eli didn't reply right away. "Then, I ain't him." "I know. That's why she trusts you." The next morning, a letter arrived. The envelope was unmarked, the handwriting crude. Clara read it by the stove, her face pale and still. When she caught Eli's gaze, she folded the paper and dropped it into the fire. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Old things. Not worth troubling over." But her hands trembled as she washed the dishes. And she didn't sing that night. Days passed. The land turned drier. Coyotes grew bolder. And Eli grew restless. He began patrolling the perimeter at dusk, rifle in hand. The sheriff's words echoed in his mind. Not just warnings, truths dressed in uniform. Then came the rider. Just after sunset, a lone figure emerged from the ridge again. Same duster, same wide-brimmed hat. He didn't enter town. He watched, waited, then vanished into the hills. This time, Eli saddled up and followed. The trail led into the bluffs north of Dry Hollow. There, nestled in a canyon scarred by time and flood, he found something he hadn't seen in years. A sigil, burned into the bark of a mesquite tree. A circle crossed by a jagged line. The mark of the Gravewater riders. Eli's past didn't just ride, it had arrived. He returned to the ranch well past midnight. Clara sat waiting, shotgun across her lap. "You knew," he said. "I guessed," she replied. "I walked away from them years ago. Thought I could outrun it." "You can't outrun fire, Eli. But you can choose what burns next." He sat beside her. The silence was heavy, but not cold. "They came for James, too," she finally whispered. "He got caught smuggling rifles. Claimed it was for the settlers, but I think it was for himself. When he tried to back out, someone made sure he didn't talk. Eli looked at her, his jaw clenched. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have stayed? I still might not. But he did. The next day, while out mending fence, he saw Lila sitting by the tree line, braiding wildflowers. Something about the way the light hit her hair made his chest ache. He turned to hammer in another post, when a shot rang out. The bullet missed him by inches, splintering the wood. He dove, rolled, and drew his revolver, but the shooter was gone. All that remained was hoofprints in the dust, disappearing toward the canyon. He sprinted back to the ranch. Clara held Lila tight, shotgun in hand. Her knuckles were white. I won't run again, Eli said. Neither will I. That night, as wind howled across the dry plains, Eli stood guard outside the house. His coat whipped around him. The moon burned pale in the sky. In his hand, he held the old revolver he swore never to draw again. The fire was coming. And this time, he wasn't riding away. The next morning, the sun rose blood-red over Dry Hollow. The wind blew dry and sour, like it carried secrets. Eli didn't sleep a minute. He watched the horizon from Clara's porch, boots planted firm, rifle across his lap. Somewhere out there, the riders circled. They weren't ghosts anymore. They were here. Clara brought him coffee. Her hand shook just enough to spill a few drops. You need rest, she said softly. I'll sleep after they are buried. She didn't argue. She just sat beside him and stayed at the hills. Later that day, Sheriff Granger rode up in a cloud of dust, dismounted stiffly, and walked toward the porch with a wary eye. Heard shots last night, he said. Anything you want to confess? Someone tried to kill me, Eli replied. Tried, being the key word. Granger crossed his arms. You bring this mess to Clara's door. I tried to leave it behind. Then leave now. Clara stepped between them. He's not going anywhere. The sheriff's jaw tightened. Don't be a fool, Clara. They took your husband. You think they'll spare your daughter. Her eyes narrowed. That's exactly why he's staying. The sheriff held her gaze a moment longer. Then without another word, he turned, mounted up, and rode away. By sundown, Clara was boarding the windows. Eli cleaned the shotgun and taught Lila how to load a shell. She handled it with eerie calm. When it gets loud, he said gently, you stay in the root cellar. Don't come out till I knock 3 times. Will you be okay? She asked. Eli smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I've been through worse. Clara watched from the doorway. But this time it matters. That night, Eli ventured into town. He needed answers. He found them in the form of a stranger seated at the back table of the saloon, broad shoulders, a long gray coat, and a face twisted with old burn scars. Viggo Kessler, once Eli's comrade, now his executioner. Viggo looked up from his drink, calm as ever. I heard you found yourself a family, Eli. That's sweet. Leave, Eli growled. Can't. Got business. We both know why you're here. Viggo swirled his glass. You broke the oath. Left the riders. That don't sit well with the men. I left after you slaughtered civilians. I left when you stopped being soldiers. You left when things got complicated. Eli slammed his fist on the table. You touch Clara or that little girl, I'll put you in the ground. Viggo grinned. You should have stayed dead like the rest of us. Eli didn't sleep that night either. He dug shallow trenches behind the barn, set tripwires using spare rope and broken glass. He loaded every shell he could find and double-checked the oil in his revolver. Clara brought him a lantern. You planning a war? I'm planning a delay. A delay for what? He looked at her, voice low. For you and Lila to run. I'm not running. You should. She stepped closer. Eli, if they are coming, they are not just coming for you. He didn't answer, but something in his face softened. You ever think we could have had peace? She asked. Sometimes, he whispered, when you're humming in the kitchen. Just before dawn, hoofbeats thundered from the canyon. They came fast, 5 riders, faces masked, rifles raised, dust clouds trailing behind them like smoke from Hell's Gate. Eli stood in the field, alone. As they approached, Viggo called out, Last chance, Mesa. Give up the girl. Give us the widow. Walk away. Eli raised his rifle. They fired first. The fight began like a thunderclap. The traps worked. 2 horses went down in the first charge, sending riders tumbling. One rose only to meet Eli's bullet. Another caught a face full of birdshot from Clara, who fired from the upstairs window. Viggo, of course, survived. He always did. He rode straight at Eli, revolver blazing, until Eli ducked and rolled beneath the horse, slashing its leg with a broken blade. Viggo tumbled, hitting the date hard, but not for long. He sprang to his feet and tackled Eli, knocking the rifle from his hands. The 2 men crashed into the barn door, fists flying. "You should have stayed, forgotten." Viggo spat, slamming Eli's head into a post. "You should have stayed dead," Eli growled, punching back. They grappled in the dust until Viggo drew a hidden knife. Eli gasped, stabbed just below the ribs. But Clara was already running. She raised the old Whitlock rifle, her late husband's, and aimed. Viggo turned just in time to see her pull the trigger. The shot echoed across the plains. Viggo collapsed. Eli dropped to one knee, blood pouring through his fingers. Lila ran out of the root cellar, screaming. Clara caught her mid-run and pulled her close. Eli lay in the dust, gasping. "I told you to run," he whispered. "You told me what mattered," Clara said, kneeling beside him. He looked up at her. "You saved me from myself." She took his hand, tears streaking through the soot. "Stay, please." Eli closed his eyes. For a moment, the wind stopped blowing. Then, his hand tightened around hers. Dawn came slow over Dry Hollow, light crawling across the land like a wounded dog. Smoke still curled from the barn's scorched frame. Buzzards circled the hills. The Gravewater riders were gone. Those who survived scattered into the wild like shadows melting at sunrise. But inside the Whitlock house, the battle wasn't over. Eli Mesa lay on Clara's bed, his shirt stained deep red, eyes fluttering between worlds. Clara pressed cloth to his wound, her hand steady though her heart threatened to cave. "You're not dying today," she whispered. Eli gave a faint smile. "You always were stubborn." "I had to be. I buried one man too soon. I won't bury another." Outside, Lila sat silently on the porch, arms wrapped around her knees, watching the wind play through the empty corral. By midday, the doctor from Three Pines arrived, a wiry man with whiskey breath and blood under his fingernails. "Bullet missed anything vital," he muttered after cleaning and stitching. "But he'll need rest. A lot of it." Clara exhaled deeply. "Then he'll have it." Eli stared. "I'm no good at rest." The doctor chuckled. "Then you'll die. Your choice." In the following days, the ranch quieted. Clara never left Eli's side. She read to him from an old book of prairie poems and fed him spoonfuls of broth when he couldn't lift his arm. Every so often, Lila would crawl into the bed beside him and fall asleep holding his hand. Eli said little, but his eyes said everything. Peace. Belonging. Something he hadn't felt in years. Then came the letter. Sheriff Granger arrived one hot afternoon, hat in hand and guilt in his eyes. This came down from Santa Fe. Federal inquiry. Clara opened it, her fingers stiff. Inside was a warrant. Not for Eli's arrest, but for his testimony. "They want him to testify against the riders," Granger said quietly. "They're cleaning house." Clara read the paper twice. If he does this, he gets a full pardon. And if he doesn't, Granger met her eyes. Then he stays a hunted man. For the rest of his life. That night, Clara told Eli. He stared at the ceiling for a long time. "Testify, and they'll come again," he said. "They'll come anyway," she replied. He nodded slowly. "Then I'd rather go down standing for something." Clara didn't cry. She kissed his forehead, stood, and blew out the lantern. "Then we'll stand together." 3 weeks later, Eli rode into Santa Fe. His arm still stiff, ribs still sore, but he rode tall. Clara and Lila followed in a borrowed wagon, her shotgun hidden beneath the seat. In the courtroom, Eli stood before a panel of judges, retelling every horror he had once buried. Names, places, the night the riders burned that village in El Paso County, the blood debts he never could repay. When it was done, the lead judge signed the pardon with a trembling hand. "You're a free man, Mr. Mercer." But Eli didn't smile. Freedom had a cost, and he was still paying. They returned to Dry Hollow in the fall. By then, word had spread. The riders were finished. Viggo was dead. The others vanished or captured. Clara reopened the ranch, hired 2 local boys to help with fencing. Lila returned to school and started drawing pictures of horses with wide, smiling eyes. As for Eli, he stayed. He still walked with a limp, still woke sometimes in the night, breath ragged, reaching for a gun that wasn't there. But when Clara would sit beside him, or Lila would wrap her arms around his chest, he'd settle. Peace didn't come like a storm. It came like rain after a long drought. Soft, hesitant, but real. On a cold morning in December, Clara found Eli standing beneath the old pecan tree near the ridge. He was carving something into the bark with his knife. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Marking a place." "For what?" He looked at her, smiled gently. "For what almost ended me, and what saved me." She walked to him, rested her head against his shoulder. "You're not that orphan anymore," she whispered. "I know." He slipped the knife back into its sheath, took her hand, and walked home. Epilogue, the storyteller's voice. And so it was that Eli Mercer, the orphaned cowboy, the deserter, the ghost, found more than justice. He found a place to belong. Some say the Whitlock Ranch still stands, that a little girl grew up and became the fiercest horsewoman west of the Rio Grande, that an old revolver, wrapped in red cloth, still sits on the mantel above the fireplace. But no one knows for sure. Only this: each spring, when the pecan tree blooms, someone leaves a fresh wildflower there. And every time, the wind seems to whisper, "He stayed."